Tarkir Dragonstorm coming out very, very soon. Next weekend, pre-release, if you are one to pre-release. We've seen almost the full set at this point. I think we're like 20 or 30 cards short of that full set. But I figured I'd hop on, share some initial impressions of what I think's going on in this limited format, talk about some things that have caught my eye. I'm really excited for this set. Tarkir is near and dear to my heart. The last time we visited Tarkir, Cons of Tarkir, that was the set that really got me into limited. At the time, it was lauded as one of the best limited formats of all time. And, well, I don't think it's really held up in the era of really, really great limited formats. I'm really excited about this set because I think what they tried to do is capture the things that were good about cons and kind of update them for 2025 modern design sensibilities. So yeah, let's just jump in. So let's just start with some basics here. I'd say this set is about two main things, and those two main things are, one, it's a 3-color faction set. So we've got the 5 3-color clans: Sultai, Jeskai, Obzon, Mardu, and Temur. By the way, this is where those names came from the first time we were in Tarkir. We actually didn't have those names before that. And secondly, it's about dragons. It's in the title, it's obvious. And I want to point out that this is what you call a 3-color wedge set, as opposed to a shard set. It's kind of like R&D jargon, but the player base uses this too. But basically, what this means is, look at the back of a magic card and put your finger on one of the colors on the back. You want to go to the opposite color, so basically the colors that color is not touching. So if you start on white, you go to red and black, and that is your wedge, right? That's one of the clans, Mardu. This is different than a shard 3-color set, so something like Streets of New Capenna or Shards of Alara, where you find those archetypes, those factions, if you touch a color and then go to the 2 colors beside those, right? So like Bant, Brokers, if you start on white, you go to white, green, blue, that's the other kind of 3-color deck you might find in some limited formats. And that distinction actually matters for how you draft and how you deck build, knowing this is a wedge 3-color set rather than a shard 3-color set. The reason this matters is because certain color pairs are going to be more relevant than others. Specifically, the enemy color pairs. And if you don't know what an enemy color pair is, again, look at the back of a magic card, touch any color, and anything that doesn't touch that color is an enemy. So for white, an enemy would be red or black. For blue, an enemy would be green or red. And those are the color pairs that matter more, opposed to, like a blue and white. Blue and white isn't going to be a very relevant color pair in this format. And the reason that matters is because, let's just say you have a blue-green gold card, like Kishla Skimmer here. Well, if you first pick this card, you can play that in either a Sultai deck, a blue-green-black deck, or in a Temur deck, a red-blue-green deck. And that's often what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to draft the enemy color pairs, because if you first pick a blue card, and then second pick a white card, so you've got allies here, right, the colors that touch on the back of a magic card, you can only play both of those cards in a Jeskai deck. There's no other clan, there's no other faction that has both blue and white. And what that means is you're not going to see any blue-white or black-red or green-red gold cards. They're all going to be the enemy color gold cards. So blue-green, black-green, all those kind of things. So it's kind of hard to actually end up in an allied color pair, but just wanted to shout that out because it is a little bit different than any other draft set, really. Just like last time we were on Tarkir, and just like any faction set, like a guild set, each of the clans get their own mechanics. So let's just talk about this quickly. So first card here, Bone Karen Butcher. 4-mana 4/4, Mobilize 2. And you'll see Mobilize with a number, and what that means is whenever this creature attacks, create 2 tapped and attacking 1/1 red warrior creature tokens. You sacrifice them at the next end step. And so a baseline, the first thing you think about is like, okay, just pushes a bunch of damage, right? But past that, there's cool things you can do, like, sacrifice your tokens to any sacrifice effects. There's cards that scale based on the number of creatures you have. There's some cards that give benefits to tokens. The Butcher here gives your attacking tokens Death Touch. And so Mardu is like your prototypical aggro deck in this format. It tends to be the most aggressive clan. Next up, we've got Temur in Harmonize. And Harmonize is pretty sweet. Harmonize is sort of like Flashback, so spells you can cast through your grave. But the Flashback cost, or the Harmonize cost, is often very expensive. And the way you make that expensive cost cheaper is you tap a creature you control, and it'll reduce the cost of the Harmonize cost by X, where X is that creature's power. So Temur wants you to play with big creatures, big green dumb things. It's kind of like red-green Stompy with some blue, and the blue is casting spells from your graveyard. Next up is Jeskai, blue, red, white, and Jeskai is often about casting spells, being kind of tricksy. The mechanic it gets is Flurry, which is something we've seen before. They just keyworded it now. So Flurry says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you do a thing. In the example here, this one deals 2 damage to each opponent. You gain 2 life. And I'm curious to see where this one lands, because we've had entire decks, entire limited archetypes based around this kind of mechanic. You know, in Thunder Junction, we had blue-red double spell. In Call Time, we had black-white double spell. And those decks kind of fell a little bit flat. We're never really some of the best decks. So yeah, just curious to see if R&D has learned from the past failings there. I usually, put a lot of faith in R&D's ability to design good limited sets. And it would kind of suck if an entire clan's mechanic just, fell flat. So yeah, we'll see. Next up is Obzon, so white, black, green. And Obzon's shtick generally is building up its creatures over time, putting counters on things, playing a bit of a long game. Obzon's mechanic is Endure, and just like Mobilize, it's Endure and then a number, so it's very modular that way. The card here, example, Fortress Kingarge, 2 mana 1/2. When it enters, it endures 1, and what Endure 1 means is you either put a +1/+1 counter on this, or you create a 1/1 white spirit creature token. And, gonna call this out now, because I know a lot of people are gonna get this wrong, the token is not flying. It's a spirit, but it doesn't fly. I'm sure many pre-release games are gonna be played wrong, because neither player realizes this. That'd just be a little bit too good, I think, but yeah, just wanted to call that out. Yeah, it seems like a pretty solid mechanic. We've had mechanics like this before. Reminds me a lot of Fabricate from Kaladesh, for those who have played that. And generally, you're going to want to make the token with these kind of cards. It's just generally good to make multiple bodies for your one card. But Obzon has a lot of cards that care about counters on your creatures. So there's going to be some game states where you go, yeah, multiple bodies are nice, but I actually care about the counter in this instance. Last one here is the Sultai mechanic. And last time Sultai was playing in the graveyard, self-milling. It's where Delve came from. Kind of similar thing going on here. Going to want to, self-mill, put things in the graveyard. The mechanic is Renew, which says exile this card from your graveyard to put some number of counters on a creature you control. And it's not just +1/+1 counters. This one, Kira Goldkeeper, gives a flying counter. We've also seen ones that give like a lifelink counter or death touch counter, so all the ability counters. And one thing I noticed about the clan mechanics is I think they did a really, really good job of having some nice mechanical overlap between them. So if you just take the 5 enemy color pairs, 2 color pairs, so blue-green, black-green, white-red, all those, they're all kind of doing their own distinct thing. Like blue-green cares about cards leaving your graveyard. Black-green cares about counters. Black-white cares about tokens. And let's just say you start the draft with a blue-green gold card, and you're like, well, I could go Sultai, I could go Teamer. The nice thing is that both the Sultai and the Teamer decks care about cards leaving your graveyard, right? Because Harmonize, that, you casted the Harmonize card, it goes to exile, leaves your graveyard. Same with the Renew mechanic for Sultai, a card's going to leave your graveyard. Another example, you start black-green. Black-green cares about counters. Sultai, it puts counters on your cards, and Obzon, again, has the Endure mechanics. That cares about counters, and you're going to have cards that care about counters there. So yeah, I think when you're drafting the set, it's going to be a very nice, smooth experience where you can pivot to an adjacent clan pretty nicely, and your synergies are still going to be there. So yeah, the clans are one thing that's going on in this set. The dragons, the other big thing. And dragons also get their own distinct mechanic, which is Omens. And Omens are kind of a riff on adventure. Just like on an adventure card, you've got like a spell on one side, a creature on the other. But the difference here is Omens don't go to exile, then you get to cast the creature later. Instead, if you cast the Omen side, this card shuffles back into your library. Which is sort of interesting, because in theory it means that a lot of them prevent you from decking if you can just, cast them over and over again. A lot of them also draw you cards, so if it's like the last card in your library, it won't prevent decking. But yeah, I think there's like some loop shenanigans to be had here. But anyways, I think the main idea behind these Omens is that dragons, expensive creatures generally, you can't just put a million dragons in your deck, but they want you to play dragons. So what's the fix? Well, have them be a split card, right? And a lot of the common Omen cards, they actually help you hit your land, so you can maybe cast your other big expensive dragons. So they either go search out a land, or like this Island Dragon here, draw you a card, getting you closer to your next land. Also, really want to call out this Twin Maw Stormbrood, which just looks excellent. 2 mana, deal 5 to a creature without flying is the Omen side, and then the Dragon side is a 6 mana, 5/4 flyer, gain 5 when it enters. Both sides of this card are awesome. And not a surprise, but they've also really pushed the multicolor dragons. So this is a really sick one common. Sonic Shrieker, 5 mana, Mardu, 4/4 flyer. When it enters, deals 2 damage to any target, you gain 2 life. And if you want to target the opponent with that, they discard a card. So yeah, just a really nice one. And of course, in any multicolor set, lands are going to be a focal point. We've got the Tri-lands back at Uncommon. These are really high picks. You just want to take them very highly. We've got the common enter the battlefield tap lands, the gain a life. The common duels exist in the land slot, and I believe at a pretty high frequency. It's like something like 4 out of every 5 packs will have one of these. We've also had this cycle of monuments for mana fixing, which are pretty interesting. So they're all 2 mana artifacts that come in, search out a basic of, whatever clan it is. So the teamer one will go get a forest, island, mountain. Then they have an ability to sacrifice them and put some number of token creatures in the battlefield. I think all pretty good, right? If you want to think about these as enter the battlefield, draw a card kind of cards, kind of creatures, they kind of are that, just in reverse, right? You draw your land first, then you get the creature later. So yeah, I don't know exactly how high picks these are going to be, but look like pretty good cards to me. So yeah, those are my first impressions of the set. Like I said, I think the set looks really fun. I tend to think that most sets look pretty fun, but this one even more so than usual. Next week, we're going to be back with the set review. It's going to come out Tuesday. If you want to catch that live, I'll be streaming that on Twitch at 5 o'clock Eastern. If not, it'll be on the YouTube and the podcast feed and all that. If you're new here and like what you see, do feel free to click that subscribe button, and yeah, we'll see you later.